All right, joining us now, we have NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona and staff writer for The Atlantic and MSNBC political analyst here with me on set, Ashley Parker. Ashley, I know that our bar for remarkable just keeps getting higher, but that was a pretty remarkable clash, and it could have serious repercussions for the state of Maine. How are governors, politicians having to navigate standing their ground, but also dealing with a president who can really impact their ability to do things in their jurisdiction?
Right. Well, in some way, what you're seeing is a partisan split, right? If you are a Democratic governor, Democratic senator, you are more willing to openly clash with the president. To me, what's more fascinating in certain ways is what you see on the Republican side, where a lot of these DOGE cuts, where the attitude is sort of break things and put the shards back together after the fact,
right,
maybe if necessary.
Which might work at a startup, but maybe not at the federal government.
And not even always at a startup. But again, for these Republicans, they're still unwilling to really challenge their president. They will sort of say, we agree with all the cuts, but we would just like some funding for NIH in Alabama, right? Or we agree with everything, but you must have made a mistake because this cut actually hurts our rural farmers. So they're sort of asking, they're still abdicating a lot of the powers that Congress has, such as the power of the purse, but they're kind of, at this point at least, politely asking for little cutouts.
All right, Melanie, I want to change topics just a little bit, but it's definitely related, and turn to a clash of a different sort, and that's with Republican Congressman Rich McCormick. He kind of faced off against this angry crowd of constituents yesterday. Let's take a quick listen.
I understand trying to do more with less. That's reasonable. What's not reasonable is taking this chainsaw approach. Why is this being jammed down the pipe so rushed and sloppily?
The people would like to know what you, Congressman, and your fellow congressmen are going to do to rein in the megalomaniac in the White House.
Melanie, I just came back from overseas, and the question I kept getting from European leaders is, why aren't people angry about this? Why aren't people protesting? We're starting to see a little bit of that. Are other congressional Republicans facing similar backlash over these DOGE cuts?
Yeah, McCormick is actually not alone. There were a number of House Republicans who were confronted by angry constituents at town halls all across the country this week. That includes Cliff Bentz. He is a congressman from Oregon. He represents a safe red seat, just like McCormick does. But he also represents a sizable share of the population that is on either Medicaid or food stamps. And he also represents a number of federal workers, because in Oregon, particularly in that region, there are a lot of federal workers. There's a lot of public land. There's a lot of the United States Forest Service. And those are the workers that were among the layoffs because of DOGE. And so as these cuts are starting to hit home, as the impacts are starting to be felt, and as these Republicans were back in their districts for the first time this week in a while, Republicans are really starting to feel the heat. But for them, it is quite a conundrum, because on the one hand, obviously, they want to protect their constituents who are federal workers. Those are the people that elected them to Congress in the first place. But at the same time, they don't want to be seen as disloyal to President Donald Trump or to Elon Musk. So that is what we're seeing playing out in a lot of these town halls across the country right now.
And Ashley, speaking of Elon Musk, you've got a new piece in The Atlantic that kind of delves into these young Musk acolytes, the guys making these job cuts, essentially. Did you uncover any methodology behind how they're choosing these layoffs other than point, click, delete?
Well, what's interesting is, in some ways, certain things we wrote about would be a comedy of errors were it not for people's jobs and livelihoods being at stake, right? So, for instance, at the Department of Energy, they come in, the Department of Energy workers, they get an email saying the court has ruled this deferred buyout can go on. This email comes in at 7:18, and it says you have until midnight to make a choice. Then at 8 p.m., while an Energy Department employee is on the phone with his colleagues, and they're all desperately deliberating over, do we take this, do we not take this, what does it mean for our income, for our families, they get another email that says, oh, whoops, actually the window closed at 7:20. So that's 2 minutes after the first email went out. Ultimately, the offer did extend until midnight, but again, it just shows shows you that there is not so much of a clear method to the madness. And in part, that's because, Elon's view is that if you sort of can control the computers, you can control the federal government. But every agency has different computer systems. Some agencies have multiple bits of code dating back decades. So even if they do, for instance, master something at Treasury or figure out something at CFPB, they cannot then just sort of superimpose it across the government. So they are going in afresh every time.
And Melanie, also Elon Musk related, I want to ask you about last night. He brandished a bejeweled chainsaw at CPAC, courtesy of the Argentine president Javier Milei. Is it possible this is getting a little too weird even for some MAGA supporters, or is the base still into it? Are they still showing up for the show?
I was in the crowd actually for that moment, and I got to tell you, the crowd was eating it up. In fact, Elon Musk's appearance on the stage was the most attended of the entire day. There was a number of speakers, and the room was absolutely packed. There was cheers, people were on their feet, everyone had their cell phones out taking pictures. And so I do think this is the new Republican Party. And when it comes to CPAC, this is a conservative conference that happens every year in a suburb not too far from D.C. This used to be a gathering for the entire Republican Party, for all corners of the GOP, the big tent party. But in recent years, it has become increasingly aligned with Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. And I think you saw that on full display with Elon Musk and his chainsaw.